Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys Marvel figure unboxing and review video. Now today we are taking a look at our final Iron Man figure, being none other than the MK85 Battle Damage version. Now this is one that I, and I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all, have been super excited to see, so I can't wait to get him out here. Now I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is of course down in the description below. They have 12-month installment plans and an awesome reward system. What we are going to do now though is get the box laying flat in the light box and do the unboxing. Here of course we have the box art, and it's done in the usual Avengers Endgame style. A massive image of the 85 in the background, plus a silhouetted shot of Tony with all the stones. But by far the coolest thing about this box art is that on the side and on the back, we've got a bunch of shots of the Iron Man armors throughout the Infinity Saga. 42, 43, 45, 47, 50, and then of course the original versions on the back, including the Mark III and the Mark IV. And the best part is, these aren't images of the movie, they're actual figures. But we're not really here to dissect the box, we're more here to take a look at the figure himself. I am hoping that he lives up to all of the expectations because, let's be honest, Hot Toys have delayed this guy a bunch. So, as I said, the expectations are rather high. But here we have him. First in-hand impressions are pretty positive. He does look, so far, and feel the part. Now you do have one tray up on top and another down below, so what we are going to do now is get all of his accessories laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything he comes with. Here we have all the parts and pieces. Now starting off with the display base first, y'all know I'm a huge fan of me diorama display bases, and that's exactly what this is. It's brand new for the MK85 Battle Damage. Now I wouldn't be surprised if we see this again going forward with larger figures, because it's a relatively big footprint. It's not overly deep, but it is quite wide. That means you should be able to fairly easily have Tony on his knees doing the snapping pose, which is of course what this is designed for. You do have a relatively thin profile as well, so it's not going to take up a ton of space in the display. You have a bunch of rocks on the outskirts, and it's relatively flat in the middle. I do like the dry brushing on the surface, and there are multiple layers of paint here. There's a darker black, there's some gunmetal, some lighter grey. I'm a huge fan of the way this looks. Something that kind of perplexed me though was why this is coming with a dynamic flight pole and a waist clamp. I mean, yeah, you could totally have him in the air on this display base, but I reckon a regular crotch grabber would have been perfectly serviceable. Now, you do also get this, the holographic shield. It is the same style of super lightweight plastic that we saw with the Neon Tech Mark 50, so if you were expecting something different, then unfortunately you're going to be a little bit disappointed. You do have this ring that you simply insert his fist into to use it with the figure himself. Don't worry, you will see that later on in the video. Now a carryover from the Mark 50 and the MK85 are these. I affectionately call them the lobster claws. They simply work by installing them onto the forearm, and then the LED on the inside makes a connection with the contact points on the peg, and this will light up. I love these. They're different, they're unique, and they have that seamless LED function, which is kind of awesome to see. You also get the gauntlet. You get multiple hands that go with this particular forearm, and I'm pleased to report it works in the very same way as the lobster claws. You simply peg it in and this will light up. And don't worry, you will see that later on in the video as well. But you, of course, get the snapping hand, and then you get two others. A fully articulated fingered hand, and then just a regular relaxed palm. all of which have the same awesome battle damage and paint applications as well. Now, you also get this bladed weapon. I really like this piece, but unfortunately, you don't actually get a gripping hand to use this with. I'm not exactly sure why they made that decision. The blade itself looks great. It's got a blade on either side, as you can see. It's painted with this gorgeous red metallic, the silver is nice and punchy, and then the blue sections are a smoked translucent plastic. But when you do want to use it, you have to use these articulated finger hands, so it's not the sturdiest connection in the world. And then of course, lastly, for the hands, you get some repulsor blasting ones. They all have the battle damage on the outside, so they should blend in perfectly with the Mark 85. And lastly, the thing that we've all been waiting to see, the Mark 85 battle damage head sculpt. And I'm pleased to report that, yeah, this sculpt is darn impressive. Is it 100% bang on to the prototype? No. Is it close enough for me personally to be happy? Yes. And I think you'll see when we pop this on the body, this might just be one of the best Tony Stark head sculpts to date, but I'm not going to make that call. I want you to let me know down below which of the Tony Stark head sculpts that we've gotten over the years is your personal favourite. One of the complaints of this head sculpt though is the colour of the hair. Supposedly it's supposed to be a little bit lighter. It doesn't bother me at all. I like the subtle metallic finish, I think the colour is on point, and it looks the way it should. But once again, I want to know what you think. What we are going to do now though is get the Mark 85 himself out here and take a closer look. Here we have him standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that, and he's finally here. The one we've all been waiting for. We've set aside a special little spot in our endgame display for the I Am Iron Man version of the Mark 85. This guy takes everything that was great about the regular version and adds a ton of awesome battle damage. Yeah, maybe I'm spoiling my hand a little bit too early, but I love this figure. He, for me, definitely lives up to the hype. There are some changes with this guy compared to the prototype, and we'll address that as we go throughout the video, but for the most part, this is everything I was expecting and more. Plus, that Tony Stark head sculpt is the pièce de résistance with this set, and you will see it on the figure a little bit later in the video. What we are going to do now though is take him off the rotating turntable, punch in and take a closer look at the details. Here we have him up close and personal, and in just a second we will swap out the head sculpt and install the gauntlet to see what that looks like on the Mark 85, because I for one am super keen to see it. Now let's address the elephant in the room first. It's the back of the Mark 85. A lot of people have said that it's too clean. Well, I raise you the question, where were you when the pre-order pictures went up? Because they very clearly showed the back and it looked exactly like this. But also, there is some scuffing, some soot, and a little bit of faded paint applications here and there, including some dirt and grime down on the feet. So, for me, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with it. Could it have been a lot more battle damage? Yes, of course. But Hot Toys focused all of their attention on the front. For the price point they were going for, they wanted to nail the look for the front of the suit. And for me, that is the most important part. So I'm glad that they poured all of the budget and R&D into making the front look as good as possible. Now as for the helmet, people have also said this is too clean. I don't honestly think that's the case. You have some chipping here and there, he's got a big nasty bump on his noggin, he even has some scratches on the gold section on the front. So I don't see it as a huge issue, but if it is for you, then let me know down below. I do have most of the LEDs in the chest, plus the LEDs in the eyes turned on, and yeah, it's a really neat effect. But the LEDs that I really care about are in the gauntlet, and we'll see that in just a second. Now let's talk about the battle damage on the upper torso, because that's where they focused most of the attention. And it makes sense, this is kind of what we're going to be seeing most of the time, because a lot of collectors are going to have this guy kneeling down doing this snapping pose. Now, the battle damage had me worried from the offset. I thought it was going to be soft, and it wasn't going to have a lot of paint, and it was going to look kinda cheap. I'm pleased to report that in hand it doesn't. The scratches have some depth to them, there's multiple layers of paint, he does have various sections where the armor has been chipped away and you can see this kind of hexagonal underlayer, and that carries over to the shoulder pads where you can see it up here, up on the traps, around the neck piece, and also on the other side, as you would expect. The battle damage is also asymmetrical, meaning one panel on one side isn't going to be the same as the other. Now, if you want to, you can totally remove the chest plate. Initially, I was thinking that they were going to actually have these scuffs be see-through pieces, so you could see the tech detail on the underside, but with the amount of paint that they used over the top, it makes sense that it's fully sculpted on the surface. Now, coming down to the legs, once again, it's an asymmetrical design, way more battle damage on one side than the other, although you do have a massive chunk of armor that's been chipped away from his knee here. I really like the way this looks. As I said, I was worried, but trust me, when you get this in hand, I think you're going to be pretty darn happy. Now, the shins and the boots are relatively clean, yes, I will admit, but you do have some speckling, a little bit of silver dry brushing and chipping, and also some dirt and grime. Plus, you do have some detail on the underside of the boots. Now, as promised, let's pop on that Tony Stark head sculpt. Here we have it, fully assembled, wearing that awesome brand new Tony Stark head sculpt. Now, I was worried that it wasn't going to be on point, but now that I've installed it on the body, yeah, I'm so very happy with the way this looks. I also have the gauntlet fully illuminated. Unfortunately, the batteries last for about 0.5 seconds. They die very, very quickly, so if you are getting this guy and you do want to have him permanently illuminated, I would suggest potentially getting some kind of fusion reactor and having him wired to be lit up all of the time. But yeah, I love the way this looks. The gauntlet does have this crack down the side with the LEDs sort of emanating up towards the Infinity Stones, and it's suitably battle damaged, as you would expect, because it's formed out of some pretty disheveled armor. I also like the collar that goes around the base of his neck. Now, when he's wearing the helmet, it looks a little bit weird. You can remove that and use the collar that comes with the regular Mark 85 if you want to, but for me, I'm going to have him wearing this head sculpt pretty much all of the time. For those wondering, yes, you can absolutely use the other Mark 85 head sculpts on the battle damage figure. Now, this is of course the replacement head sculpt, and I think it works great. I do prefer the one that comes with this figure on this particular body, just because it matches the overall battle damage aesthetic, but if you do want to be real nasty and use the Tony Stank head sculpt, and there you have it. Now, I don't mean to joke, I know a lot of people actually really do like this head sculpt, so it's worth taking a look at it on the Mark 85 battle damage body. And yeah, it fits, it's in proportion, the neck is slightly longer than the replacement sculpt, so it does make him look a little bit more lanky. But I have heard people say that they prefer that overall look. So yes, if you're wondering, it totally does work. Now for a quick side-by-side comparison, here we have the Battle Damage 85 on the left and the regular version on the right. Now if you are trying to pick between the two, as I know a lot of you probably are, then let me just preface this by saying they're both fantastic choices. Now it'll just come down to whether or not you want to represent the 85 in his crisp and clean comic book accurate glory, or you want to go with Tony Stark's final badass moments where he snaps his fingers and says, "I am Iron Man." For me, I like them both. That's why I picked them both up. But if you did have to choose, my eye is automatically drawn to the battle damage version. It's something different, it's unique, it's going to stand out in the display, whereas the clean 85, it kinda blends in with some of the other clean die-cast armors. It's still awesome, and it stands out in its own way, but the battle damage version just stands out that little bit more. Next up, here we have the other battle damaged Iron Man released by Hot Toys, and it's of course the Mark 7. Now this was a special edition, and he's kind of a retro figure. He's all plastic, so you're going to notice a ton of differences right off the bat. He's shorter, he has no diecast, so he is automatically going to be lighter, and he's suffering from the pink panty syndrome. But because he is battle damaged, it's not as obvious. Now, these two represent very different design philosophies. The 85 has a lot more sculpted in battle damage, whereas the Mark 7 has a lot less sculpted battle damage, but more battle damage paint applications. Now, it's going to be up to you which of the two you prefer, but I for one like the way they did it on the 85 just that little bit more. I like brand new sculpt work rather than just slathering the thing in paint and being like, yeah, there you go, it's battle damage, right? I don't know which is the superior approach, but the 85 battle damage for me wins out of these two. Lastly, here we have the big three standing together: Iron Man, Cap, and Thor. Now, I would have loved to have seen battling versions of Steve and also Thor, but unfortunately Hot Toys decided not to give us them. Maybe one day they will, but for now, these three are the figures that I'm pretty sure are going to be the centerpiece for a lot of people's endgame displays. How do they look together? Yeah, pretty darn good. Iron Man is the tallest of the three by a hair. Now, I don't know if that's going to bother you. It doesn't really for me. I wouldn't have minded if Cap was ever so slightly taller so he could match the height of Iron Man, but if you do have him kneeling down in the snapping pose, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I know, it sounds like a bit of an excuse, and that's because it is, but for me, that's just my rationale behind why I don't think it's the biggest deal. Iron Man figures have been steadily getting bigger and bigger over the years, and a lot of people do like to complain about that, so as you can see, yes, this guy is the same height as the other Mark 85, which is slightly taller than both Cap and Thor. Now for the patented budget Stark weight comparison, let's compare both Mark 85s. Now I have the regular version here first, and he comes in at a very respectable 883 grams. He is a hefty boy. Now comparing him to the battle damage version, as you can see, he comes in at 874, so a very subtle difference between the two. I was honestly expecting it to be a little bit more of a delta, but as you can see, yeah, there isn't a ton of weight that's been taken out of the battle damage version. Just quickly before we move on, I wanted to compare all three Tony Stark head sculpts. Now back when the first Mark 85 was released, we started off with this one, which became known as the Tony Stank head sculpt. It was so controversial, in fact, that Hot Toys decided to, for the very first time, offer a replacement service. They gave you the opportunity to send this one back in and get this one in its place. It's technically a subtle upgrade from the Mark 50. The base face is exactly the same, they simply changed the hairstyle. I do really like this sculpt, but I know folks are probably wondering, how does it compare to the new one? The new kid on the block, if you will, the battle-damaged head sculpt. I really like this. Now, some people are probably going to be shocked to know that it's actually based on the Tony Stank sculpt. A lot of the key markers are almost identical. The forehead is pretty much the exact same shape, the eyebrows, the eyes themselves, the nose, and the jawline. You also have the very same detail on the underside of the chin. Does that make the new head sculpt any better or worse? No, I don't really think it does. I think it definitely is an improvement over Tony Stank, the likeness, for me, is on point. Which one do I prefer out of this head sculpt and the replacement one, though? That is a tricky question. I haven't quite decided yet. You'll have to let me know which of these two is your favourite down below. Just going over articulation. Now bear in mind this is my personal copy of the figure, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm sure when you get yours in hand, you can push the joints slightly further than I'm willing to go. Now if you own the standard Mark 85, you already know how this works, because pretty much all of the joints are in the exact same places. Now starting off with the head sculpt, he does have a hinge plus a ball joint at the base of the head itself. You do also have another ball joint at the base of the neck. So combined, he goes forward that much, he goes back to there, swivel, then of course pivot side to side. Now if you're using the Tony Stark head sculpt, it has a fixed neck, so you will get slightly less range. Now I always advise when moving the arms to pull them out first. That way you won't have as many pieces colliding and potentially scratching up your paint. The arms will go up to there. They will of course go forward and back. There is a butterfly joint at the shoulder, swivel at the bicep just below this upper joint, a double bend at the elbow that goes past 90, plus a ball joint for the wrist. Now the torso does have multiple sections that can pull apart to give you a little bit more range, as you can see. He does crunch forward to there, he crunches back, swivel, then pivot side to side. Now with the legs, I would again always advise moving these panels out of the way first, because this particular one at the front feels very flimsy. Now the legs can be dropped down independently of one another. As you can see, this leg is now sitting a lot lower than this one. They will of course go forward, they will go out, swivel at the upper thigh, a ratcheted double bend at the knee that goes slightly past 90, a ball joint down here for the foot, plus some toe articulation. Just going over the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing, as you would have seen from the accessory segment, is that he doesn't come with any gripping hands. He only comes with the fully articulated fingers, which normally I would be fine with, but when you give him a bladed weapon such as this, and then you expect collectors to try and finagle these fingers around the handle, which is far too narrow to actually fit them, yeah, it doesn't look all that natural. The second annoying thing, and I totally understand why they did it, but it's still kind of weird to me, they made the holographic shield out of this super thin and lightweight clam tray plastic. Now the reason why is so that it wasn't too heavy for when he holds it, but I reckon there was a middle ground where it could have been a nice, sturdy, solid plastic and feel high quality and also be lightweight enough. This just feels really cheap and nasty. The third annoying thing actually doesn't have much to do with Iron Man himself. It's more down to the technology that Hot Toys are using for the batteries. This is the last Iron Man figure from the MCU for at least some time. We'll have to wait and see how we go with that. But to use so many tiny button cell batteries and so many little compartments where other companies are doing plug-in USB charge versions with single-touch activations, this in 2021 isn't quite good enough. I think Hot Toys could have done a capacitive touch sensor on the front, you plug him in with USB-C, you charge him up, and away you go. Having to manually install all of these and switch on all the tiny little switches just, for me at least, isn't good enough. The first cool thing is that, yeah, the lightning refocuser is fully compatible here. Yes, the battle damage does kind of throw the look off because this is super clean where the rest of the armor super isn't, but it attaches in the very same way as the standard Mark 85. You simply remove the back battery cover housing, and then this piece simply pegs in over the top. The second cool thing is the diorama base. Now, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it is very scene specific. Hot Toys could have quite easily cheaped out and given us another hexagonal display base with Mark 85 battle damage version on the front, but I'm glad they didn't. This puts him right in that moment where he does the snap, and I know more than a few people are going to display him that way in the collection. The third cool thing is that the swap out gauntlet, number one, is super easy to peg in, and the power from the bicep actually transmits through a connector into the gauntlet itself. So luckily, even though I just complained about the million little batteries, you don't have to worry about putting any in here. If you have the Mark 50 and the accompanying accessories pack, you know what I'm talking about. Plus, we also have the snapping gesture. It took us 2 movies to finally get this from Hot Toys. For some reason, they didn't deem the Infinity War Thanos worthy. I'm still not exactly sure why, but I'm super glad we got it with Tony here. Just wrapping up on the battle-damaged version of the Mark 85. Now, Hot Toys, they set the scene perfectly with the clean version. This guy takes everything that was great about the OG, the die-cast content, the paint applications, and some of the accessories, but adds even more. You get sculpted in battle damage, you get the holographic shield, you get the bladed weapon, without a hand to hold it, weirdly enough, but you still get it, and you get a stunning Tony Stark head sculpt, maybe the best of all time, but as of the recording of this video, I still yet haven't decided if it is that for me. This figure though ranks right up there at the very least in the top 3 die-cast Iron Man suits of all time. It has impressed me to no end. Now, yes, there is an elephant in the room. The battle damage is kind of just on the front. Now, I'm okay with that, because I'm going to have him displayed looking at me doing the snapping pose. If you, however, want to have him displayed with his booty facing you, yes, you are going to be missing a ton of sculpted in battle damage, but then I might tell you to potentially reevaluate your posing decisions, because most of the detail, as I said, is on the front. So maybe sit down and think about how you want to have this guy posed in your display before making your purchasing decisions, because it is something that is true. There isn't a ton of sculpted in battle damage on the back, it's all on the front, but it's done to an exceptionally high standard. People were worried that it was going to be flat and not all that well textured, but it isn't. It's sharp, it's crisp, and it is very well painted. So if you're asking me, should I pick up the battle damage Mark 85? I can honestly say that, yeah, this guy gets my tick of approval. Now, I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is, of course, down in the description below. They have 12-month installment plans and an awesome reward system. While you're down there, check out the link to 6 Scale Network, the Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.